Some guys just always seem to be on the same page, play after play, week in and week out. Of course, not all wideouts are able to get in sync with their quarterback. Whether it's a timing issue or a lack of trust, there are some combos that just don't appear to be clicking at the moment. Here's a look at our 10 rankings for the 10 quarterback wide receiver duos with the worst chemistry right now. 10. Cam Newton and DJ Moore. As much as Sam Darnold struggled during his 9-game stretch as the Carolina Panthers starter, he was at least getting the ball out to top receiver DJ Moore. The 4-year wideout was dominating despite the lackluster quarterback play. But boy has Moore sure missed Darnold or anyone other than Cam Newton for that matter. The latter returned to Carolina midseason and took over as the starting quarterback for Week 11 against the Washington football team. Moore's production hasn't been terrible, but it's easy to see that ever since Cam Newton's taken over under center, he just hasn't been the same threat to opposing defenses. With Newton as a starter from weeks 11 to 14, Moore turned 38 targets into just 21 receptions for 285 yards and 1 measly touchdown. Compare that to Moore's first 4 games with Darnold, when he had 30 receptions on 43 targets for 398 yards and 3 touchdowns, and the drop-off is quite obvious. Moore just hasn't been able to enjoy the same level of production late in the season because of Newton's limitations as a passer. He's shown flashes of being a potential Pro Bowl wideout. He just needs the right quarterback throwing him the ball. If only Carolina could supply him and the rest of the offense with an above-average starter for once. Number 9, Tua Tagovailoa and DeVante Parker. Parker seemingly had a long-awaited breakout year in 2019 when he hauled in 72 catches for 1,202 yards and 9 touchdowns. But he struggled to get back to that level, and the arrival of Tua in South Beach hasn't helped. Miami's young QB has developed superb chemistry with tight end Mike Gesicki and his former Alabama teammate Jalen Waddle. But it's just not coming together for Tua and Parker. Both men missed several games with injuries in 2021, but even when they were on the field together, the connection isn't there. In their first 5 games together in 2021, Parker only had 1 touchdown, and even though he's been consistently close to double-digit targets per game, Parker only exceeded 5 catches once in those first 5 games with Tua. For whatever reason, Parker hasn't been able to find the same connection with Tua that he had with Ryan Fitzpatrick in 2019 and 20. You gotta think that 2022 will be a make-or-break year for this duo, otherwise Miami may have no choice but to move on from one of them. Number 8, Aaron Rodgers and MARQUEZ VALDES-SCANTLING. MVS emerged as one of the game's elite deep threats last year. His 20.9 yards per catch led the NFL. He finished 2020 with 33 receptions for 690 yards and 6 touchdowns. There was plenty of hope that he would take the next step and emerge as an elite number 2 option to DeVante Parker, but it simply hasn't happened. MVS missed weeks 4 to 8 with a hamstring injury, but even when he's been on the field, he hasn't been much of an impact player whatsoever, save for 2 games. He did have 123 yards on 4 catches against the Minnesota Vikings in Week 11 and 98 yards on 5 catches and a touchdown in Week 15 against the Baltimore Ravens. But otherwise, his big play combo just hasn't been able to connect on the deep ball enough. Through his first 9 games of 2021, MVS only hauled in 25 of his 51 targets. A wide receiver getting that much attention from Aaron Rodgers simply has to be better than that. Fortunately for the Packers, opposing defenses still haven't figured out how to cover Davante Adams, so they can always count on Rodgers throwing the ball to his most trusted wideout 20 times a game. Number 7, Ben Roethlisberger and James Washington. The Steelers have never honored James Washington's trade request. What a shame for him, because Washington and Ben Roethlisberger once again struggled to get on the same page in 2021. Even with Juju Smith-Schuster missing most of the season, Washington hasn't been able to step up in his absence. A simple look at Washington's 13 games in 2021 tell the whole story. Roethlisberger started all but one of those games, during which Washington had a pathetic 24 receptions and 41 targets for 285 yards and only 2 touchdowns. Washington only surpassed 50 yards in 2 of those games, and his passer rating when targeted fell below 85 times and below 40 on 3 occasions, which is just sad. What more can we say? The Big Ben to Washington combo wasn't meant to be. Number 6, Jalen Hurts and Jalen REAGOR. To be fair to Hurts, Jalen REAGOR hasn't been able to get it going no matter who's been throwing him the ball in Philly. The Eagles' 21st overall pick from last year's draft, taken 1 spot ahead of Justin Jefferson, mind you, struggled with Carson Wentz as his quarterback, and he's just somehow gotten even worse since they made the switch to Hurts. At this point, it's hard to see REAGOR and Hurts ever developing a strong connection, what with Devonta Smith slotting in as his new number 1 wideout and tight end Dallas Goedert enjoying life without Zach Ertz. Hurts' ability to extend the play should bode well for receivers that boast REAGOR's skill set, But nope, even if he's catching well over half his targets, they tend to be for very minimal gains. Through their first 18 games together, the duo hooked up for just 1 touchdown. They've never gone for more than 6 receptions or 57 yards together. Kinda makes you wonder why opposing defenses would even waste a defender covering REAGOR at this point. Number 5, Justin Fields and Allen Robinson. 2021 should go down as the most disappointing season of Robinson's career. Just when you hope that rookie QB Justin Fields would provide an upgrade over the previous quarterbacks he's worked with, Robinson's production slips even more. Hard to blame A-Rob for struggling to get it going in 2021. Andy Dalton isn't starting caliber anymore, but Fields also wasn't ready for prime time behind that horrible offensive line. It was just a lose-lose for Matt Nagy in Chicago going into this season. No Bears player should be more frustrated with their 2021 season than Robinson, considering that he's about to enter free agency. Having averaged over 70 yards per game in each of the previous 2 years, Robinson failed to hit that number even once in his first 10 games this year. And if you look at the numbers from week 3, when Fields made his first start, up until week 9, before Robinson suffered a hamstring injury, it ain't pretty. Robinson never finished with more than 4 receptions during that stretch. He had 0 touchdowns and was held to 32 yards or less 4 times. His passer rating when targeted was below 50 twice. The good news, this tandem won't be around much longer, as Robinson is bound to find a new home and a new quarterback next season. Number 4, Daniel Jones and Evan Engram. You can equally fault both men for this mostly disappointing partnership. Sure, Jones struggles with accuracy and has had a bad habit of committing mind-numbing turnovers, but at the same time, Engram's constant drops are a problem that clearly won't go away. Engram's best season to date was with the New York Giants in 2017, when Eli Manning was the main starter. From 2017 to 19, he racked up 12 touchdown receptions and consistently averaged around 50 yards per game. But Engram's productivity has predictably dropped since Jones became the undisputed starter in 2020. Suddenly, it's as if even 30 yards per game is asking too much of this combo. Engram is merely a replaceable level player now. His number of targets continue to drop, but that's just life when you and your QB aren't on the same page. Number 3, Baker Mayfield and Jarvis Landry. Unlike a fine wine, this Mayfield-Landry combo just seems to get worse with age. For whatever reason, Mayfield has just been mediocre at best since his enthralling rookie season. Having 2 Pro Bowl weapons at his disposal has done nothing to help the 2018 first overall pick emerge as an elite QB. Even though 2018 was a disastrous year for Cleveland, Landry was a bright spot with 1,174 receiving yards. His average of 73.4 yards per game, however, dropped down to 56 yards per game in 2020, even though the Browns were a playoff team that year. Well, things have frustratingly gotten worse for Landry in 2021, even though he no longer has to compete with Beckham for targets. His yards per game totals have gotten worse. Sure, he catches a good percentage of his targets, but Landry isn't ripping off explosive plays anymore. There are simply short yardage gains in Kevin Stefanski's offense. Once a feared red zone threat, Landry only had 1 receiving touchdown through his first 9 games of 2020. Again, that's largely Baker being unable to feed him the ball when it matters most. You just feel like Landry could benefit from a fresh start with an elite QB for once. Number 2, Daniel Jones and Kenny Golladay. The New York Giants handed the former Detroit Lions star wideout a shiny 4-year contract worth $72 million in the 2021 offseason. Needless to say, it didn't take Golladay long to realize that Jones isn't exactly Matthew Stafford. It's hard to fault Jones entirely for his struggles. New York's offensive line has been a mess for nearly a decade now, and he clearly hasn't experienced the benefit of having some innovative offensive minds to coach him up. But still, it's frustrating, and not just for fantasy players, to see a Pro Bowl caliber talent like Golladay struggle so much in the Big Apple. Having Golladay miss weeks 6, 7, and 8 to injury didn't help matters, and Jones' neck injury that forced him to miss the final 6 games ruined their chances of trying to develop some chemistry. But in their first 5 games together, this pair was as bad as Mentos and Coke. Golladay only topped 100 receiving yards once and didn't record a single touchdown between weeks 1 to 5. In that span, he was targeted 29 times and only caught 17 of those passes. His passer rating when targeted was a pitiful 53.1 against the Washington football team in Week 2 and 39.6 against the Dallas Cowboys in Week 5. And in their final 3 games together from weeks 9 to 12, Golladay just had 6 receptions on 12 targets and 0 touchdowns, and his passer rating when targeted in those games was below 70 twice. Yes, these two have a lot of catching up to do in the offseason if the Giants are serious about keeping Jones around. Number 1, Sam Darnold and Robbie Anderson. Bad chemistry didn't apply to this duo during their tenure together with the New York Jets. Anderson was the only receiver that Darnold actually got anything going with during his time in the Big Apple. Anderson had a career year with the Carolina Panthers in 2020, racking up 95 catches for 1,096 yards and 5 scores. When the Panthers traded for Darnold before the draft, the obvious hope was that he and Anderson would regain their chemistry right away. but that chemistry was mostly non-existent during Darnold's 9-game stint as a starter before his injury. From weeks 1 to 9, Anderson was held to 3 catches or less in all but one contest. 57 yards he posted against the Jets in week 1 was Anderson's personal best during that stretch. Yes, 57 yards, for a guy who averaged 68.5 yards per game in 2020. Anderson only had 2 total touchdowns over those 9 games, and Darnold's passer rating when targeting Anderson between weeks 4 to 9 was never higher than 43. It also doesn't help that the Panthers' wideout is near the top of the leaderboard in drops. Luckily, this is another connection that we probably won't be seeing beyond this season. Which current QB wide receiver duo do you think has the worst chemistry in the league? Let us know your thoughts in the comment section down below. If you're new here and you haven't subscribed yet, now's a great time to do that by hitting that subscribe button down there. If you like the video, hit the like button, we'd really appreciate it. And until next time, tune in to TPS every single day for more cool videos. We'll see you.